This is August the 28th. It's a day that I've somewhat been dreading in a way, but kind of excited about. This is the day that Nancy and I moved back to Grand Rapids. And yeah, I know. We've really come to love it here in Muskegon, really enjoy it, but we're heading over to, as I said last Sunday, to Dan and Sue Newman's for lunch for a real taste of Muskegon. And then we're going to be heading back this afternoon. So we're excited about it. August the 28th is kind of an interesting day for us, too. It sort of was a convergence. It was 3 years ago today that my wife's mother passed away and went to be with the Lord. She was a very strong, committed believer. So it's hard to believe it's been 3 years already that she's been gone. And today also, kind of ironically, would have been my parents' 68th wedding anniversary. So August the 28th is a very special day for us. My mother died in 2008, and my dad went to be with the Lord also. Both my parents were very committed believers as well. My dad passed away in 2011. So, in fact, September the 8th will be the 5th anniversary of his passing. So it's amazing how time flies and how life moves on. The passage in your bulletin was, as Terry correctly said, was taken from Colossians 3, verses 1 through 8. And I looked at that, and I thought about it this week, and I wanted to bring you some thoughts this morning on the church as a community of grace. And as you can probably tell also, I'm kind of getting over a cold myself. Well, actually, I'm not getting over it. It's kind of getting over me. But so I apologize for the reverberation there. But I was thinking about what it means for the church to be a community of grace, because that's really very important for us. And this was the topic, although a different text at the time. This was the topic that I looked at back in 2014, the second Sunday that I was here, which was the first Sunday of March in 2014, March 2nd. And just wanted to sort of, now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit better and a chance to sort of share some of those things with you and offer some thoughts. The passage in Colossians 3 is a good one to look at again, just as an introduction. Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. Now when he says, set your minds on things above and not on things of the earth, you have to understand what he means by that. He doesn't mean that you shouldn't think about things on the planet, right? We are coming to the end of summer. It looks like in a couple days, a nice cool front is going to pass through, and we'll enter September with highs in the low to mid-70s, and that'll be wonderful. I had the opportunity the other week to do a wedding, and I was down in Jackson, Michigan. Unfortunately, we were indoors for the wedding. I had a wedding a year ago, September, that was outdoors, and it was very hot and humid, and it was 95 degrees in Jackson, right? Very hot, but we were indoors. I didn't have to go outside for pictures. They don't include the preacher in pictures at weddings anymore, apparently, which is fine with me. I don't want to ruin the picture, but also just I don't want to be out in 95-degree weather in a dark blue suit. That's not a good thing for me. So he's not talking about we're going to enjoy the colors. Nancy and I are going to have our own personal weekly color tour. We've had that the last 2 years, and we'll have it again this year. We get to drive from Grand Rapids to Muskegon about 3 times a week, and we get to see the colors, and it's amazing. You just kind of see them, and then they're gone. We get to see everything between here and Grand Rapids 3 times a week. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And God's handiwork, you know. That's not what he means when he says don't set your minds on things of the earth, but things above. He's talking about motivational things. He's talking about moral things. Don't think about evil things. That's what things of this earth are here. College football starts up, well, it's actually started officially, and that's a cool time of year. Some of you I know could not care less about that. Some of you are very passionate about that, but we like those sorts of things. That's okay. That's not what he means when he says set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. He's talking about how we live. And what he means for us is that we as the church of Jesus Christ should be a community of grace. People should walk in from outside into here and see and sense something very different from what is all too often out there. Now, in the summertime when it's 95 degrees and you're out there and you step in and there's air conditioning in here, you can feel the difference right away. Let me suggest that as an analogy for you, okay? That when we walk into the church, we should immediately sense a different climate, a different temperature. We should be a community of grace. I have had opportunities to experience grace in the outside world. I've had opportunities not to experience grace in the outside world. I really don't get pulled over a lot with my car, but the last 3 times that I have been, I was going a little bit too fast, and the officer let me go. Okay? Don't always do that, okay? Don't always do that, but he let me go this time. By the way, we went around. Your diaconate is doing a wonderful thing. We're going around to various police departments in Muskegon and taking them a little certificate that says we're praying for them and we support them, we want to encourage them, and we're taking them a snack just to know that in these very, very difficult times for our law enforcement people, that we're praying for them, that we care for them, right? So, but I've had, I don't know whether this particular officer knew that. I don't think he did, because this was a long time ago. But he let me go, okay? So every once in a while you experience grace out there. We want to experience it in here all the time, the transforming power of grace. And so he says, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature. And he lists them. These are the things: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived. Our Band of Brothers is starting up in a couple of weeks, and I've got some brochures for that. If you didn't get one from me, see me today before you leave, gentlemen, and I'll give you one of those. But a lot of the guys in the Band of Brothers have told their stories, and it's interesting. I've told you my story. It's pretty boring. I was saved when I was 6. I was baptized when I was 8. God called me into the ministry when I was at camp when I was 12 years old. That's about it, okay? I didn't have a long, checkered past. I mean, it took every bit as much of God's grace to save me as did anybody, but I wasn't. But every once in a while, one of the guys in the Band of Brothers will talk about their past. And, of course, what is said down there stays down there. This is the good kind of Las Vegas down there. We share with each other to encourage each other, to be accountable to each other, to show grace to each other. That's what we do. But it's interesting to hear some of the men tell their stories, what a kind of a journey they have been on, and how that they are trophies of God's grace. That's an amazing thing. So we used to be that way, he says. You used to walk in these ways. But now you must rid yourselves of all such things as anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. These are the things that have no business and no part in a community of grace. We ought to embrace one another literally and figuratively, okay? Now, here's just some introductory thoughts I want to share with you. First of all, the church is a community. The church is a community. The New Testament knows nothing of a believer living life in isolation from fellow believers. Those who profess to know Christ need to, not in a legalistic sense, not in a, oh, you got to check the box kind of sense, but in a sense that, it's sort of like, God gave us this instinct called hunger. Nobody has to tell us to eat. In fact, we have people that tell us not to eat, okay? They're called Weight Watchers people. Some of them even walk among us. And I've long since forgiven them, okay? But there's something about it. God created in us this urge, this desire for food, which is a healthy urge, if we use it properly, okay? Well, the idea of being a believer in Jesus and not being apart on a regular basis, okay? I was talking to somebody this morning, and I said, hey, I haven't seen you around, and sent you a Facebook message, and hope you're doing okay. And some people who have Facebook check it all the time. Some hardly never check it, But I said, hey, we missed you. Hope you're doing well. Well, had family in town and wanted to spend time with them. I said, that's awesome. That's just great. No guilt there, okay? This is a guilt-free place in that sense. This is a community of grace, right? So that's good. That's a good thing. And I know for some of us, for a number of us, this is a painful issue. We've got family, we've got friends who know the Lord, profess to know the Lord, but they don't meet regularly with the church. And that's just not something the New Testament knows of. That is not something the New Testament suggests as even a remote possibility, right? So we struggle with that, but that's okay. We will struggle with that, and that's what's going to happen. But we need to make sure that we are in fellowship with one another, because that's where, and we have specialized fellowship times. The Beth Moore thing coming up in about 3 weeks is an example of that. This is a chance for the ladies to get together and spend the better part of a day just listening to a teacher, listening to God's Word, listening to one another. It's a good thing. Band of Brothers, okay? The women's Bible study, the senior ladies' Bible study. All these ministries that are firing up now are all a part of that, okay? Second, the church is a community of accountability. We are to make each other better. We are not here simply to be comfortable. Now, hopefully we are comfortable, but we are here to hold each other accountable. And that goes for me as much as anybody, as well as anybody. And I've had a number of individuals over the nearly 2 years that I have been here who have come to talk to me and said, Pastor, I'm concerned about this situation, and I'm concerned about this or that. Nothing major, thank the Lord, but that's not only do they have my permission to do that, but it's sort of built in. That's the way a family works. I want you to know that I'm the pastor of this church. I'm not the president of this church. I'm not the dictator of this church, okay? I don't run this church. I work with committees and boards, and there is accountability. And anything that I want to do going forward, I want to do with the blessing of the diaconate and the blessing of the trustees, the blessing of the advisory board, and that's why it's very, very important. I hope that you've seen that. I'm not a dictator. I don't like to run things. I prefer things to just run themselves. In some ways, this is what I have to work on, but in some ways, if I just came here and preached and didn't do anything else, I could be very comfortable with that, in a way. Okay. Well, invite me over for dinner once in a while. That's okay. You do that too. But basically, that's the way it is. But we are to be accountable to each other. So sometimes there are those times, people come to me and say, well, Pastor, have you thought about maybe we should do this or do that, or is this an idea, or maybe you could do this better. And that's okay. We all need that. We all need accountability. So that's part of being a community of grace. Thirdly, the church is to be a community where believers mature and grow together. Not just growing in isolation, but growing together as a body. I want to talk a little bit more about that, and I want to look at my primary passage this morning, which is in Ephesians 4. It's only 2 verses, so it shouldn't take longer than about another 45 minutes to go over it. No, I'm kidding. Just seeing if you're paying attention. Okay. This is Ephesians 4, verses 14 to 16, okay? And I like this. I like this because this describes what the church is supposed to be. There are a lot of passages that do that, but this one does in particular, okay? Now, he talks about, we're kind of getting it in mid-thought here, but he says when we come to trust Christ and we become a believing community, he said, we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people and their deceitful scheming. What do we know about infants? They're not developed. They're not mature. They don't respond to situations in a very mature way. They're easily tossed about. They're easily angered. They're easily upset. Their emotions are on the surface. They can be screaming and crying one minute, and they can be laughing the next, literally, okay? We all know. We've all had experience with perhaps children or grandchildren, or we worked in nurseries, or we taught children, or whatever, okay? I would not last very long working with infants, okay? I have a hard enough time working with college students, Sometimes even they can be trying or challenging, okay? But instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ. We will grow together. We will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head. Now, what does a mature body do? I'm talking about a physical body. A mature physical body, think of the stages that little ones go through. Now thanks to social media, somebody can have a brand new baby, and after a few weeks or whatever, the baby can roll over. Used to be that's what you got your dog to do, but now you get your your child to roll over, right? And you make a video of it, and you put 75 pictures on Facebook of your child who rolled over, and you put it on Snapchat, and you tweet this, and it's incredible, you know? I saw a picture of, it was a side-by-side picture of a young woman standing in front of a mirror and one of the Apollo astronauts, and it said, Neil Armstrong went to the moon and took 6 pictures. You know, this lady went, you know, to the mall and took 75 pictures of herself, you know. Because we can do it. The technology is there, okay? Now, what we need to do is to mature. So we speak the truth in love. We grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head. Mature bodies, children learn to roll over. Then they learn to crawl. Then they learn to stand without falling down. Their bones are very soft. They're built very close to the ground. God knew what he was doing. So they don't have very far to fall, and everything's kind of soft. So, that, you know, that doesn't mean they don't get upset a little bit about it, but they're generally okay, right? But they learn to walk, and then they learn to walk much more second nature, and they learn to run, and they learn to skip, learn to do all things. Pretty soon they learn to do somersaults. That's what a mature, all the parts work together. When you and I walk around, we don't even think about it. That's just what we do, okay? So the body submits to the head. Now your physical body takes orders from the head, from the brain. Our spiritual body takes its directive from Christ, right? From him, the whole body joined and held together. You're a part of the body. I'm a part of the body. When we start in the middle of September, we start looking at spiritual gifts in the church. We're going to look at spiritual giftedness, and we're going to see that various parts of the body do various things, but all the parts work together, not for the good of themselves, but for the good of the body. So my eyes help me see so I don't walk into things and then harm myself. My hands, my feet, other parts of the body, the heart, the stomach, all do their work, and they all do it for the betterment of the body. So what does the body do then? Well, the last couple lines. It grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. Now, I've been here a little over 2 years. I've been the pastor here for almost 2 years. It'll be October 4th of 2016. It'll be 2 years. And the question that we need to ask ourselves, and I need to ask as much as anybody, is how have we grown in the last 2 years? Or 5 years, or 10 years, or whatever. How have we become? Have we become a body of people that grows and builds itself up so that we love and encourage and bless and support and pray for and minister to the needs of one another? Or have we become like a little child, okay? That all the body parts kind of flail because they don't know how to work together. I remember when my son was about 3 months old. He's almost 36 now. Years, not months, okay? And we had him sitting on, he was on the table, one of the little things that they recline in, you know, you put a little belt across the stand place, and it kind of bounces up and down a little bit if you want it to, but you sit there and you feed him. And he was sitting there one day, he's about 6 months old. No, he's about 3 months old, I think. And he discovered his left hand. I mean, he just saw it. And he just looked at it, and he kind of wiggled his fingers. And I'll never forget, he just looked, wow, I can do that, you know? And he realized that this was a part of him and that he could control it. It was amazing, okay? So what was happening? The beginning of a maturation process. This is why oftentimes when you take a little baby's blanket away from them, they start to cry, because they feel like the blanket is part of them. They haven't sorted things out yet. So they have that, but that's why you just sat there like this. That was the beginning, okay? Now I take him to the golf course, and I'm lucky if I can get 200 yards off the tee, much less have it in the fairway. Don't say anything, Jerry, okay? Although I did beat him last time. I finally beat Jerry in golf. It took me forever, but I finally did. I don't Sorry. Yeah, public humiliation, yeah. I'm encouraging you. I'm building you up in love, Jerry. Yeah, right, but he beat me a whole bunch of times before then. He probably will beat me a whole bunch of times after that. But now, I 200 yards, I'm lucky if it's in the fairway. He's probably 280, 290, 300 yards out there or more sometimes. So he's matured physically quite well in that regard. So we are to build each other up in love as each part does its work. So the question then becomes, what is your work? What is your work? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next few weeks. What is your work? What is your task? What is your job to help grow First Baptist Church? Or to help grow God's kingdom, first and foremost. But we are a part of God's kingdom. Let's look at a few points here, and we'll wrap things up. First of all, the church is not to be a collection of infants. Now, we all start out that way. I know he's fallen on hard times, and probably that's of his own doing, but Bill Cosby had a comedy album a number of years ago that's titled, which was, I Started Out as a Child. We all started out as a child, right? Everybody starts out as a child. Now, the church, we're not supposed to stay that way. My first significant pastoral experience, well, actually my second pastoral experience was at a church in Madisonville, Kentucky. And we had Sunday school, and then we had church afterwards. It was a very small church, much smaller than this one. And so my son, in between church and Sunday school's over, we're getting set up for church, ready for the service to start, and my son comes running out of the nursery. He runs down the center aisle toward the front. He's like 3 years old. And he says, okay, ready to go. He thought it was time to go home. Now, if he's 3, you accept that. It's, the best thing, but you expect that sort of thing. Nobody's going to hold a grudge, hopefully, against a 3-year-old doing something like that. But if he's 30, that's a concern. You're supposed to be a little more grown up than that. Okay? Now, the church to be a collection of infants, all right? That's what we're not supposed to be. Now, there are all sorts of ways, okay? Other than being a community of grace, there's all sorts of options. We can be a community of gossip. That's one option. Not a good one, but it's an option. We can be a community of griping. Not a good one. And that's just a couple of the G's, We could be a community of drama, okay? We could be a community of complaining, griping, right? We could be a community of, filthy communication from your lips. I want to preach a sermon sometime. I want to do a sermon series sometime in the future on the Christian and blank, just whatever. And I think one of the topics I want to pick is the Christian and social media. We need to be careful how we use social media. Okay? If Jesus were to read what's on your Facebook page, what would he say? Because you know what? He does, okay? You don't have to friend Jesus. He's there already. You can't unfriend him. You certainly can't block him. It won't work, okay? So there's all sorts of options that we could be. We're not supposed to be a bunch of babies. We're supposed to grow up. We're supposed to be mature. What does it mean for me to be mature? Okay? So I walk into church and something isn't the way that I want it. How do I respond to that? What does it mean to be mature? It means that we are not a collection of infants. So we need to consciously be aware of our need to grow up. Now, brand new Christians are going to act like brand new Christians. This is where a community of grace, being a community of grace, comes in. Brand new Christians are going to struggle with all sorts of things, and that's how we have to be there with them. It's interesting that Jesus invited sinners to come to him. In fact, one of the things he was criticized for was eating a meal, having table fellowship, which, by the way, implies an acceptance of someone in the first century. Whatever's going on in your life, I want you to know that I accept you. See, you need to come to Jesus because he helps you fix what the problems are. You don't need to fix yourself and then come to Jesus. That's like saying I need to get cleaned up before I take a bath. Doesn't make any sense, okay? We come to Jesus as we are. He takes us as we are, but he doesn't leave us where we are. His statement to the woman, right? Neither do I condemn you. Now what? Go and sin no more. Okay, so acceptance, but with the idea that I come to Jesus because that's where I know I can get better. So we're not a collection. We should be growing. We should be maturing. What does that look like? How much more mature are you? How much mature am I in Christ than I was a year or 2 years ago? But a more important question is, in the context of this passage, is how much more of a mature body of believers are we now than we were a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Are we still complaining about the same old things? Do we still have the same sort of attitude toward this or toward that? And it's a question. It's an open-ended question. A little bit like the question at the end of Jonah, okay? It's an open-ended question. The Holy Spirit, I can't and I won't identify, I won't go after individuals. I don't believe in doing that, okay? But I will put the text out there, and I'll suggest applications. And what it's up to each of us to do is to look at our own lives and say, yeah. Are we acting childishly? Are we as a church like the body of a 3-month-old that's just all flailing and doesn't have any control? Or are we like, we just got done watching the Olympics, right? It's amazing what some of those people can do. I swear, little Simone Biles defies gravity, okay? Just defies gravity. How do you do that? She's up in the air and she does a flip, and I'm like, okay, she's got to come down now. And she does another flip in the midair and then lands perfectly. How do you do that? Okay? It's because the body is all working together in submission to the head. Now, I know talent comes into that. I know that there are a lot of people her age can't do that. Her age, I know I can't do that. My granddaughter's into gymnastics, and I asked her one time I was down there, I said, you want to watch me do a somersault, a hands-free somersault, just in midair, just flip over and land? And I was running through the living room, and she thought I was going to do it. She's 8 years old. And I just said, no, I better not. Better not. Can't, okay? Secondly, the church is not to be tossed back and forth by waves. Now, what he means here is that we are not to be caught up in false teaching. When he looks at Ephesians, when he mentions in Ephesians 4 and in verse 14, he says, we will not be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every kind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. We took our grandchildren, we were up here, we went to Michigan's Adventure, we went to the wave pool. They love the wave pool. And, you're there and there's lifeguards and it's really well set up. But, the water's nice and calm. It's like several feet deep one end, and you just sort of wade in and it gets deeper and deeper. And all of a sudden you hear this sound, and that's the warning, here come the waves, okay? And so people love to be tossed by the waves, and at one point, I wasn't sure if my grandson knew what to expect, and he's getting tossed, he's going up and down, and I was a little concerned, and I said, Jackson, are you okay? And he looks over at me, and he goes like this. He was loving it, okay? He was loving it. But this is not a good thing here. We're easily swayed. We're not grounded in our faith. We don't know the Scriptures. We don't make a regular habit to read the Bible. Okay? We know a lot more about what's happening on Big Brother or some other show or Game of Thrones. That's another conversation I'd like to have with folks. Not here necessarily, but just generally speaking. And again, not to be a legalist about it, but do you know the Scriptures? How well do you know the Bible? How well are you involved in the Bible? When a teacher comes along, are you able to discern? By the way, that applies to me as well. Please don't think for a moment that you have to just simply be spoon-fed everything that I say. I tell my students from time to time, I say, the greatest compliment that you can pay me is if you say to me, Professor Smith, I understand what you're trying to say, but I'm not sure that I agree with you. Okay, let's talk about it. Now, I tell them, better be ready to bring it, because I'm going to bring it, okay? But if you hear me say something that doesn't resonate with you and you wonder about it, please feel free to talk to me about it. Okay, I didn't understand something you said, okay? Because I know that the Bible says this and this here and there, but how does that relate to what you said today? That would be wonderful. That's what it means that's part of what it means to not be tossed back and forth by the waves. We are not to be easily deceived or fooled by false teaching. If you look at, by the way, some of the movements, some of the groups we would, I think, correctly call cults and other movements, you will find that they almost always are centered around one person who has unquestioned authority. I remember the whole Jim Jones debacle back in the 1980s? And those, 900 and some people drank poison Kool-Aid because the authorities, and there were these dead bodies all in Guyana, which was extremely hot climate. It was just horrific, you know. But it started with those people following a man named Jim Jones, who more or less said, I am the only authority. You have to believe what I say. It is unquestioned. And you have communities like that. They tell people how to run their lives. They tell people who they can marry. There's all sorts of movements like that. Whenever you have one person who is in the position of sole authority, that's when you have trouble. And that's not what I'm looking to be. Never have. Okay? That's why I value my diaconate. They're your diaconate too. That's why I value the diaconate. That's why I value the trustees. That's why I value the advisory board. Because we all need to have these conversations. That's why the Band of Brothers has been such a helpful thing for me. And I lead the thing, okay? But I need that. I need that accountability. I need that input. I need those thoughts. I need that encouragement, okay? So that we're not easily deceived. So these are the things the church is not supposed to be. This is not what we see in a community of grace. We don't see immaturity. We don't see gossip. We don't see griping. We don't see drama. Oh, we might see it once in a while. But we deal with it, right? We deal with it in love. We are not easily swayed away from the truth of the gospel. We're not deceived by false teaching. Well, what are we, okay? First of all, 3 points, and then I'm going to wrap it up. The church is to be a place where we speak the truth in love to each other. That's a tough thing to do. That's a tough thing to do. It's easy to ignore the truth and just say, well, you know, I don't want to cause problems. I'm just going to do the loving thing. Well, in some contexts, that's a possibility. But in other contexts, there are other things that you can't do it that way. Okay? So I remember I was out, this was several years ago. I was out for a jog, and it was in the wintertime. I was wrapped up kind of warm. And I was running along, and I turned the corner, and I noticed that on this particular corner, there was some ice, some black ice. And there were a couple of vehicles that already had, nobody was hurt, just a fender bender. So I jogged up the road, and I saw a car coming toward the intersection at what I would consider normal speed under regular conditions. Okay? But I knew that if they kept going, they were going to hit that black ice, and they were going to rear end another car, and it could be really bad. So I stood there jogging, thinking about that, and I thought, well, you know, I don't want to tell them to put their brakes on. I don't want to boss them around, tell them what to do, so I'll just lovingly let them go. No, I stopped and I waved my arms and I said, slow down. Because they were about maybe a quarter mile. I said, I tried as much as I could. I don't have sign language or anything. I tried to say, slow down, it's slippery, okay? Now, I spoke the truth because I needed to speak the truth. I didn't want him to get hurt. I didn't want him to get into an accident. Didn't want him to have to, file an insurance claim and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we need to do. We need to speak the truth in love. We also need to hear whenever those kinds of truths are spoken. It may not be easy. It won't be easy. Okay, let's just say it won't be easy. It's not easy. Nobody likes constructive criticism. I don't care who you are. Nobody likes it. I don't like it. I'll be okay. I'll get over it. And I've told you before a little bit of my story, and you've told me various ones of yours. My story includes the fact that, I had a dad who basically, in many respects, my acceptance was performance-based. Okay? Do well. Make me proud. Because I want you to do well. Right? And so it's difficult for me sometimes when my performance is criticized at something to feel like, oh, well, you don't like me. Right? Sounds silly to say it, doesn't it? It just sounds very childish. It sounds very immature. But that's sometimes the way we feel. So we need to learn to speak the truth in love to each other and receive the truth in love. Now, that comes from a trusting environment. We have to build an environment of trust. And if you lose trust, it's very difficult to get it back. But we need to be a community where we love each other and where we trust each other and where we can speak the truth to each other in love. It's not easy, okay? It's challenging. We need to be willing to submit to accountability. If we can't do that, then what do we got? If I'm going to hold you accountable, but I'm not going to let you hold me accountable, then what do we got? We got dysfunction. Okay? Secondly, the church is to become a mature body in submission to its head, that is Christ. All the parts of the body have to move together. They have to function together. People that are physically challenged often have conditions where their various parts of the body, maybe there's a disruption, maybe there's a disease, maybe there's been an injury, but the signal from the brain doesn't get to various parts of the body. So they have difficulty walking, they have difficulty speaking, they have difficulty, holding things. This is what happens when the body is not able to submit to its head, when it has been injured. Likewise, the church is to be a mature body in submission to its head, that is Christ. So we need to find our gifts, find out what our role is in the body, and do that role. The rest of us need to submit to that role. Right? There's a very important concept. I'm going to talk more about this later on in the fall. It's called submitting to strengths and protecting weaknesses. People should be placed in areas where we know they can thrive, where they have the talent, they have the ability, the God-given gift to thrive, and then we need to submit to their authority, to their gift. We'll talk more about this. Okay? People who have the gift of leadership and the gift of administration, that's not my strongest gift at all. I do a little bit of it, but that's not my strength. So I look to others. I look to people like Tom and Jerry and others. No cat and mouse games there, guys. Okay, Tom and Jerry. Yeah. I knew when I got here. I've said this before. When I got here and I had Tom and Jerry, I thought this is great. And then I walk in and I have Jerry and I have a guy named Newman. Okay, I just had to set that one up. That was great. But what it means to be a mature body, to submit to that, that's what we need to do. So my question when I come here is, what would Jesus have me do? How would Jesus have me function as a healthy member of this body? What can I do? So what does my right hand do? What does my left foot do? Well, it does its task. Now, if it's not well coordinated, I had an experience last Tuesday. I was graciously invited to go and play some tennis. I went with Bruce and Darlene and a few others, and it's the second time I played tennis in, I think, 20 years. Okay? Yeah, just roll that around in your brain for a minute, okay? I think about an hour into it, I finally actually hit the ball, kind of thing. But it's the coordination. If you're not, and you got to worry about the wind and everything, and I just, I'd have one really good shot, and then I have another one that was terrible. Why? Because the parts of the body weren't working together properly. So I did okay, but I could have done a lot better. Okay? Simple, easy shots just into the net. Well, if we as a church are not working together, if each member of the body is not doing its part, and again, I'll say it again like I said it before, when we start in September looking at this, the question I'm going to remind us of on a weekly basis is, when I come to church and I am a part of this service and everything else that I do, I get in my car to go home, I ask myself the question, what did I do today to bless and encourage somebody else? That's the question we're going to, I don't care how small it is, that's the question we're going to ask. We're going to start with a series in Band of Brothers on conversational evangelism. So is there one person this week that I can talk to about Jesus? I don't care how informal it is. I don't care how simple it is. I don't care how brief it is. But can I just start a conversation with someone else where I talk about Jesus? Now, for some of us, that's terrifying. I'll mention it. It's not calling anybody out because she put it on social media. But Angie Gassman put a little note up, said, guys, guess what? I actually talked to a stranger today. I'm like, what? What are you doing? Yeah, I was standing in line, and I talked to, it was a police officer, so she was being real safe. And she just talked about, what the church is doing, and talked a little bit about the Lord, okay? Now, for a lot of us, that's terrifying. I understand that. That's okay. Just start small, okay? I love, again, Joe Aldrich's term, long-term, low-pressure, soft sell friendship evangelism. I'm not talking about you going door to door and just knock on people's door and open door and start preaching hellfire and brimstone to them. That's not a good thing, you know? That really doesn't work. I would say it doesn't work anymore. I'm not sure it's ever worked, okay? But build relationship, build bridges, and just talk about the Lord. You say, well, that's hard for me to do. I know, but you got to do some of it. Some of you that may be your gift. Others, you have gift of teaching, gift of encouragement, gift of helps, gift of hospitalities. But what can you do? Because we all have to do something. We're all gifted to do something. There are no free rides in the body of Christ. There are no free passes. You say, well, I can't do this. Okay, fine. Well, what can you do? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. So the church is to become a mature body. And we all work together. We work in concert. It's a wonderful thing when believers dwell together in unity, right? It's a wonderful thing to go to a diaconate meeting or a trustee meeting or an advisory board meeting, and we're all on the same page, and we're all working together. We're all contributing our thoughts because we all want to go in the same direction. We want to grow First Baptist Church, and we want to serve God's kingdom. Finally, the church is to build itself up in love as each part of the body does its work. When we come to the house of God, when we meet together, whether as a whole church or different church groups or whatever, our main focus is to be, okay, what can I do, what can we do here to build up and encourage other believers? What can I do? As each part of the body does its work, what can I do then to build up others in love? Not what are they going to do for me? Not, if they don't do this for me, I'm going to get my feelings hurt. Right? But what can I do? You might get your feelings hurt, okay? It's going to happen. It happens in families all the time, okay? I had an older sister. She's the greatest sister in the world. She's just amazing. And I hope she sees this. She won't, but because don't have it in Grand Rapids. But she is, okay? In the years that we were growing up, it's a wonder that one of us did not kill the other multiple times. Because that's what families do sometimes. They get into scraps, they get into fights. Because sometimes they're young. They're just kids. They act immaturely. But when they grow up, they shouldn't act that way anymore. The church is to build itself up in love as each part of the body does its work. So my question for you, as we finish up next week with Ephesians 2:10 and look at that passage, is what is the work that you as a part of this body are called to do? So that when you get ready to leave and get in your car, you have a snack, you fellowship, you hang out, you eventually get in your car and you go home, you can ask yourself that question. Not a bad question to put on your dashboard of your car. I'm not telling you to do that, I'm just recommending it. Okay? The question is, what did I do today to build someone else up in love? What did I do today to build up First Baptist Church? Now, maybe I hope you did get blessed. I hope there was something positive that happened to you. But the question that I want you to continue to ask yourself now, week in, week out, is when I come here, whether it's on a Sunday, whether it's on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Thursday or whatever day it is, the question is, what can I do to build up others, to encourage others? What can I do to build up First Baptist? And what can I do to build up God's kingdom here in the greater Muskegon area? The church is to build itself up in love as each part of the body does its work. We're going to talk in the next several weeks, not next Sunday, but after that, about several ways in which you can look at yourself and say, what has God gifted me with? What has God given me the ability to do, to serve His kingdom and to serve this church? Because we all are to be doing something. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word.